Hello, everyone. Um, I'm very glad to be here, and I'm going to have a presentation a little different than the other presentations. My presentation has the title "Promoting Learning and Social Experiences of People with Autism Spectrum Disorder in the Museum," and I will try to make a short introduction about what is a museum and why it is important for all of us, including people with ASD. So let me start my presentation with Charlie. Charlie is a 10 years old, was 5 years ago, 10 years old. He went to the Natural Museum, History Museum, with his parents and his friends to spend a sleepover, for a sleepover. So while all the other children were playing in the museum, he prepared to look the exhibits and write the signs because he loved dinosaurs and he wanted to learn every detail about them. And suddenly he found an error. Charlie, this is not possible, his mother said. They are experts. Charlie insisted, and he was right. Later, he received a letter from the museum confirming that Charlie was right, promising that they will correct the label and hope to see him again. Charlie was a child with ASD. Of course, we know that not all children or people are like Charlie, but it is important to see how many opportunities we can provide in museums for people, including people with ASD. So before to proceed to issues about museums and autism, I would like to say, what is a museum today? A few months ago, museums celebrated their new definition. And among others, we can say that museums are open to the public, accessible and inclusive. They foster diversity and sustainability. They work and communicate with communities and with the participation of communities in order to provide opportunities for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. So museums are places where we can have very important learning and social, meaningful learning experiences throughout our lives. Museums support formal education, schools, lifelong learning, well-being, and finally, the quality of our life. Arts and culture and museum have a very important role for all people, including people with disabilities, who face many barriers in museums. So museums during the last decades exploring more and more ways to be accessible and inclusive for persons with disabilities in terms of equity and quality. So, speaking about museum experience, I would like to say a few words, because it is a very short presentation, about what is a museum experience. When we talk about museum experience, actually we're talking about an interactive experience, which is shaped by three contexts that are overlapped. The first is the personal context, which refers to the individual factors, the expectations, the prior knowledge, the specific characteristics of each person, the motives, the interests, etc. The physical context is all about museums, are the architecture, the exhibits, the lights, the acoustic, everything about the physical space. And the social cultural context includes issues, influences, social cultural influences, and of course social interaction in the museum between the members of the group, between visitors and staff members, etc. People with disabilities face a lot of and different barriers of access, which in turn, they are also a multidimensional reality with interdependent barriers. Sensory, attitudinal, lack of opportunities, physical. So this is a very dynamic way, the degree of accessible provisions in a museum. In this slide, we can see visualizes this interactive and dynamic situation of museum experience and the interactiveness between different contexts, and the way that different barriers interact each other and to the museum experience. For example, the way we conceive people with ASD, for example, it can be reflected on the resources, on the accessible and available information on the website, which is the physical space, which in turn motivates a family to go or not to go. It affects the physical space, what arrangements we can do in a museum, and of course the way we communicate with people with ASD in the museum. So we can see one barrier, how it affects everything. It is said that if you have met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. We know that there is an enormous heterogeneity A number of areas can be affected by autism spectrum disorder, but each person is unique. So if there is no one experience of autism and museums are open to the public, are autistic people an unpredictable audience for museums? So the answer is not quite. Despite the many differences, there are some specific characteristics that are different among persons, but they may consist barriers in museums, making museums difficult, challenging, or attractive. Some of the barriers. Every museum is different, so going to a new place, it is a challenging itself. Museums may be noisy, busy environments, crowded environments, especially at peak times when there are a lot of people in the museum. Changes in light and noise level depending on the museum and the exhibitions and the museum. For example, changes light between different rooms, noise between the rooms of the museum and the cafe, exhibits that produce sounds. All this environment can cause stress, distress, or anxiety. The size of the museum, big museums, a lot of rooms, no clear routes to the exit, or etc. People with ASD may face difficulties to communicate their needs or their desires, or interpreting other behavior, for example, other visitors, or the unwritten rules in the museum, what is allowed to touch or not, etc. And all these things become more difficult when there is a lack of accessibility provisions, when there is a lack of information. One of the most important social barriers is the lack of awareness. All these misconceptions, all this misinformation about autism, widespread assumption makes things more difficult. This is very important for families because it was found that when families want to visit a museum, they want to feel safe that museums know how to respond to their children with ASD. So if they don't have these resources, if they don't feel this sense of feeling, they feel that might be judged for a reaction and they decide not to go. On the other side, when you come in the museum, you are a guest, you are a visitor. You become a guest to the works of art. So there are some benefits when the museum is autism friendly. Museums are predictable. They have specific rules, structure, exhibitions, permanent collections do not change every day. So they are spaces that people who love routine, they come again and again, and sometimes they become regular visitors. They provide learning experience through objects. It's object-based learning. So this is important for people for experiential learning, for object-based learning. There are a range of different collections. So people who have specific interests, they want to focus on details, they may find very interesting museums. For people who have particular interests. Museums generally are visual spaces, so for visual thinkers, it can be very interesting. Besides visual and auditory stimuli, art making, we know how art is important for all children with a range of goals and benefits. Very important for social opportunities, including the families. Recreation skills, families who feel that they don't have many opportunities to spend time with their children in other environments or to interact with other people in other environments. So museums can enhance families, schools, communities, and have a greater social impact. In a few words, based on the international experience, there are four main axes in order to make a museum autism friendly. The first thing is training museum staff. And when we say museum staff, we mean all museum staff and the security guard, because everybody should be aware and informed how to respond to a visitor with autism spectrum disorder. The second important The second important aspect is consulting associations. Museums seek to consult associations of people with ASD, schools, professionals, academics. They want to reach the community. They must learn about autism. They have to collaborate with them in order to organize their material, to take evaluation, to take feedback, reorganize, etc. So these two, training and reaching the communities, it's very important. The third is that they provide a lot of resources even before the visit in the museum. The museum experience starts before we go to the museum. And they also specifically organized activities for groups. Let's see some examples. Museums focus on the material they provide before the visit in the museum in order to prepare the visit. Sensory maps, social stories, information about what times are very busy or less busy. Social stories or visual stories related to specific content of an area of a museum. This is very important, as I said, to create a welcoming environment, to know what to do. Trials, it is a checklist what to do and what to say, making a route in the museum in order not to feel confused. They provide a separate calm place, quiet space in case of visitors who want to have some relax or some reaction. Ear defenders. And very important, the signage, the wayfinding, and the museum staff should be clearly identifiable and easy to find. These are examples from the National Museum of Contemporary Art in Greece. We can see a sensory map, and on the downs is a social story from the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art. Other practices in the museum during the visit: backpacks, material with maps, activity suggestions for activities related to specific topics, toys to play, sensory resources, packs, focus tools, dark glasses for bright rooms, fidget toys, many things that can make the visit more structured and interesting. We can see in the picture a backpack with the theme of archaeology. They provide also activities and online resources for families and technology, especially for people who prefer to communicate with technology. For example, we have apps with social guides or communication tools. Children or adults can press a button to ask something or to find something, etc. Many workshops, many art workshops, many programs. And here is very important the collaboration with specialists, with special education teachers, occupational therapists, in order to provide sensory creative activities, the way we communicate, the time we give, and the process, with a lot of benefits for all children. And the other type of activities is the early morning sessions. For example, the museum open before for groups with autism spectrum disorders, or for families before the museum opens to the public, or after, or Sundays, where these sessions or artworks are specifically designed for these groups with sensory activities when the museum is quiet, etc. And during these activities, museums can make arrangements in the rooms. For example, they can alter the light, or they can change the noise of exhibits, art exhibits that produce very sudden sounds. They can make more friendly the environment. They provide resources specifically for these events, as I said before, pre-visit material. And I don't know about the time. I'm trying to be in time. Yes, so in conclusion, this overview about what museums can provide is very important, because we have to see, and we know that all children, including children with ASD, should have chances to develop themselves in different environments. Museums are a whole new world, and museums are trying to reach the so-called often forgotten visitors, because they have stressed the importance, their attention to visual impaired visitors, to deaf and hard of hearing visibles. Now they stress the importance more and more to these, to people with ASD. So we need an inclusive strategy in museums, in collaboration with associations and people who know and work with autism. Focus on museum staff training, but also focus on teachers, on teachers who go with the students in the museums. There are many things that we can search here, but what is very important is to have further research in relation to the local and cultural context of each museum. Museums are small, bigger, local, national. There are specific networks. So if we want to have a strategy, an inclusive strategy, and promote social experiences in museums, we have to see this context. I'm finishing with another aspect of museums. Museums have a tremendous power to promote better understanding to the wider society, not to specific audiences, but to the wider society through their exhibitions and their messages. Here we see an art exhibition named entitled Balances in Larissa, in Greece, which was an art project between a school of children with ASD and a local gallery. And all the artworks of the children were exhibited in the museum, and people from the city were invited, the families, to see the exhibition of the children. I started with Charlie, and I will finish with Thanasis. Thanasis is a child from Larissa, and he loves dinosaurs. He paints and creates dinosaurs, and he uses them when he plays. He made this artwork, and when he went to the museum and he saw his artwork there, he had the idea to make many dinosaurs for people or children who would like one of them. So the museum staff put a stand next to his artwork, and everyone could take a dinosaur. This is a little visitor, and I will finish my presentation with my own dinosaur. It's this one. And I'm wondering, is this a message? I'm here. I can do great things. I want to share my interests with you. So let's give the chance to all the children to send us this message. Thank you.